let's take a look at some information and charts on Basic Attention Token, or BAT, for Brave New Coin. So the basic idea behind BAT was that Brandon Ike, the Firefox co-founder, wanted to make a browser in order to give back ad revenues to creators and users viewing and clicking on the ads, as opposed to Google or Facebook or whoever else collecting that ad revenue. Great idea on paper. They decided to go with Ethereum and an ICO with some private raises instead of using a stablecoin or using BTC, which at the end of the day is probably better for this sort of thing. Doesn't really make sense to me to use a token that has volatility baked into it if you're paying people ad revenue. And how this works is the content creators sign up for becoming a verified publisher, and then they receive these direct donations or ad revenue through a KYC'd website called Uphold. There may be more than just Uphold, but that's the one I use personally. So it's not really crypto in the true sense of crypto. It's not exactly frictionless. There's a lot of fees involved, transaction fees on ETH. Again, a great idea on paper, just kind of misses the mark for me as a user of BAT. And I would just rather have a stablecoin, USDC. You know, if they switch this all to USDC tomorrow, I think everybody would be happier for it. Brave, however, is a browser that many people use. We'll look at some stats on that. They have a lot of swaps baked in, DeFi stuff baked in. They have NFT support now, because why not? They have exchange support, Binance, Gemini. Looks like they have credit and debit card support as well. So they're trying to go full crypto citizen browser. They do have 1 million creators registered at least, and we'll look at those numbers more specifically. Here's the browser. It's clean, looks just like Firefox for the most part. Not a lot of people report too many issues with Brave, but some people have issues loading websites just because of how intertwined ads are with the websites themselves. One thing to keep in mind if you do use Brave, it gives you an idea of how wrapped tightly everything is with spyware and whatnot on various websites. But that does mean that they generally load sites faster than most other browsers. Here's some stats for Brave: 33.8 million active users, monthly active users, and 11.7 million daily. I mean, these numbers don't really mean too much to me unless we compare them to Google or some other browser, right? As like a pie graph. Like anything at this specific moment in time doesn't really mean anything. It's in the millions, right? So cool. They also have this sort of buyback type of program where they buy BAT for the Brave Rewards program. We can see all these purchases here, and then those get distributed in the back end to those KYC'd accounts. And they switched from Uphold to Coinbase here, so it looks like you can maybe sign up through Coinbase now. I'm not too sure. And if we look at the publishers specifically, most of them are on YouTube and Twitter, although Twitch I expect to be bigger. Any video platform in general would probably be larger than things like GitHub or Reddit. And most of these have sort of plateaued, potentially because some of the incentives are waning for people to sign up and promote Brave, the browser. If you look at transaction counts in the line graph here, they've fallen off pretty handedly since mid-year or early year. And all these spikes, whenever you see repetitive spikes like this is typically some sort of consistent distribution. In this case, it's very likely those distributions to creators from Brave once a month, or however often they occur. It looks like it's about once a month. Those spikes have sort of dwindled off. Average transaction values, if this was truly a medium of exchange, utility type of token, I'd expect the on-chain stuff to be very, very small. Because of fees, it doesn't make sense to actually send BAT. If you're a publisher, you're probably receiving BAT and then immediately selling it on the exchange you receive it for something else. You can't really do much else with it. Or you are a publisher who's using it in the browser to send to other publishers in the browser, and that isn't all necessarily on-chain. It's sort of in some ledger in the back end or something. So you're not going to see that on these on-chain stats. So you don't want to see transactions falling, even with publishers, verified publishers over 1 million. You don't really see that on-chain. It doesn't, to me, it isn't really its intended use. It's kind of silly. Why not just pay people in stablecoin? Now here's NVT, which like everything else in crypto right now, looks bullish. It's kind of at its all-time lows. Active addresses also down significantly from mid-year. And again, a lot of this stuff isn't actually the utility at all, because I think the utility just isn't on chain. It's too expensive to be on chain, especially when ETH fees were as high as they were. When you're receiving, in my case, less than $10 a month sometimes in tokens, that's several multiples less than the actual fee sometimes to send an ERC20 token. And because very little is on chain, at least I don't think it is, you're probably not going to use MVRV because it's not really going to be too useful. MVRV is a measure of market cap versus on-chain activity. Historically, when market cap has breached an equal value to on-chain activity, it has been the top. Most recently, it reached almost 2x on-chain activity. So you can't really use this for anything. And again, just to give you some idea of what it looks like for someone who actually receives this token. So I get these tokens once a month or whenever they send it to me, and then I just immediately sell it into BTC every time. And none of this shows up on chain, at least none of my transactions. Until I remove it from Uphold, then it just sort of sits here in BTC, right? So you're not going to see that in the on-chain stats at all. For Google Trends, BAT actually did hit an all-time high in Google Trends a few weeks ago in mid-year. I think a lot of this was spec related. For some reason, I don't really know why it's in the DeFi conversation. I think the browser is useful for DeFi and is clearly plugged into that stuff, but I really don't see BAT as DeFi for all the reasons I listed, right? KYC, it's not really on chain. It doesn't really make any sense that it's a volatile token, but hey, it clearly gained value along with all the other DeFi stuff. Brave browser continues to gain in popularity. I think the browser isn't going anywhere. I think it's extremely popular, and it's definitely a gateway to people getting into crypto, so it's good for that. But I just think the token is very silly. Something that's even more silly to me is this is Aave, and you can actually lend BAT and borrow BAT on Aave. I don't know how they got into Aave, because again, it doesn't really make sense to me. This is MakerDAO collateral. They're also collateral for MakerDAO. Again, that doesn't really make too much sense to me. But these were clearly voted on to be added as collateral on the protocol side of things. It's not like, I don't think at least, BAT paid somebody off to add this, which makes it even weirder that people actually said, yeah, let's add BAT as collateral. I don't know, other than the more the better as far as things to lend and borrow. I don't know, just kind of weird. It's also in the Grayscale trust. 3 million, so it's the smallest trust so far. A recent add, but again, weird that it would bubble its way up to Grayscale trusts. So BAT's probably not going anywhere anytime soon because it's sort of ingrained in everything now. Just kind of bizarre that it is where it is. If you look at some technicals for BAT USD, it basically was a stablecoin from 2019 to 2021. Just kind of held that quarter 25 cent level, ranging, multi-year. You could call this an inverted head and shoulders. You had a series of lows, a lower low, and then an equal low to the previous lows. Broke out of a horizontal resistance level, clearly on a volume. You can see where that level was at 25 cents. And in January, along with everything DeFi, had its nice break, formed a head and shoulders, broke down, and here we are now on this bull div, death cross in between pivots, way above volume support. I think anything that isn't actually DeFi, like BAT, but was considered DeFi, probably needs to retrace to its January open before anybody gets too excited about it. It's still 2x from that 25 cent level, and trend metrics are definitely not on your side here. So this could mean revert to 75, but in general, it's not a trade for me because there's no wind in its sails. And here's the cloud again showing a mean reversion possibility, saying that this is oversold because of this TK disequilibrium, and it's generous enough to sort of paint a level at $1 even, so that would be close to a 2x up from here. And everything in crypto is painting this, so if other stuff moves to its mean reversion levels, including BTC and ETH, BAT probably will as well, and everything else I've talked about this week will probably do the same. This thing doesn't exactly have a mind of its own, so that's important to keep in mind. against BTC, BAT has ranged and ranged and ranged, broke up, broke down, ranged and ranged and ranged, broke up, broke down. And it'll probably just continue ranging here around 1700 sats, probably forever. You know, I don't expect this to necessarily outpace anything that has more utility. Even ETH, we can look at that chart, and there was this inevitability of an ascending triangle, then there was this inevitability of head and shoulders, and in 2020 it all broke down. It has its boom bust cycles. This may double you out in a year, you know, 2 U's here, 2 V's, but for me this is just a giant avoid. You know, there's no yield on this unless you're buying it and sending it to Aave. I don't think this is on Wi-Fi or Yearn, but it might be. I don't know. It's just weird to see BAT in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be as collateral. Just kind of bizarre. So overall, Brave's a great browser. BAT is a great idea with poor execution. I think it works. I mean, I clearly get paid, right? People get paid. It's not like people aren't getting paid. There are a lot of tokens in circulation. Another thing that's an issue for things like ADA. There's a lot sloshing around. Very little of it is on chain because transaction fees are so prohibitively expensive for the most part relative to what most people receive. So on-chain stats are kind of useless because none of that stuff's really on-chain. It's in centralized ledgers. And technicals look like they have a potential for mean reversion so long as everything else does. But BAT's not going to move on its own. And against BTC and ETH, it is definitely a giant avoid. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETH-BTC fund that I trade for Techemy Capital on Enzyme.finance along with the DeFi portfolio. Things slowly beginning to look up here. This is non-custodial portfolio management tool where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. All transparent. AUM allocation performance. You can see deposits and withdrawals on the bottom here, and you can see all the trades that I make. You can see me swapping through Paraswap, through ZRX. You can see me lending on Compound. You can see me lending on Wi-Fi now. So I'm able to do a lot of stuff with Enzyme, more and more every month, which is great. Still, for the most part, sitting in just under 50% USDC there on the DeFi side of things, and still 80% USDC, interest-bearing USDC on the ETH-BTC side of things. That's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.